From 1969 to 1974, the Brady Bunch invited America into television's most famous blended family, creating an idealized vision of domestic life that continues to resonate in our cultural consciousness. The story of a lovely lady, a man named Brady, and their picture-perfect suburban adventures became more than just a sitcom. It evolved into a multi-generational touchstone that defined family television for decades to come. But what if the sunny suburban world of the Brady family concealed behind-the-scenes realities far more complex, contentious, and occasionally dark than anything that appeared on screen? Today, we're revealing what Barry Williams, Maureen McCormick, Christopher Knight, and other cast members have finally shared after decades of careful silence. The bitter disputes with network executives that threatened cancellation multiple times. The controversial original concept, ABC, rejected as too progressive for mainstream America. The surprising physical dangers on what appeared to be television's safest set. And the shocking revelation that television's most wholesome family show was created by a producer with a secret personal life that directly contradicted the traditional values his show celebrated. You think you know the Brady Bunch? The cast has broken their silence about what really happened during the creation of this American institution. From the actors who couldn't stand each other, despite portraying the perfect siblings, to the systematic exploitation of child performers during the show's massive merchandising phase, this wasn't just another family sitcom, it was a carefully constructed fantasy that took a severe toll on those responsible for maintaining its wholesome facade. Creator Sherwood Schwartz once admitted in a rare, unguarded moment, "I was selling America a family that couldn't exist in reality, using performers whose actual experiences were often dramatically at odds with what viewers saw on screen." After today's revelations, you'll understand exactly what he meant, and you'll never watch the Brady Bunch the same way again. The revolutionary concept that terrified ABC. The most shocking truth about the Brady Bunch is that television's most traditional-seeming family show was originally conceived as a groundbreaking exploration of America's changing family structures, a concept the network found so potentially controversial, they nearly rejected it entirely. What viewers don't realize is how progressive the show's premise actually was for 1969, explains television historian Tim Brooks. Blended families were rarely portrayed on television. Divorce was still taboo. The premise of a widow and widower marrying and raising children from previous marriages was quietly revolutionary for mainstream entertainment. Creator Sherwood Schwartz's original vision was even more daring. Sherwood initially wanted the parents to be divorced, not widowed, reveals producer Lloyd Schwartz, Sherwood's son. The network flatly rejected this. ABC executives insisted that divorce was too controversial for family viewing hours. They mandated the parents had to be widowed to make the premise more palatable to conservative viewers. This watering down of the original concept created an internal contradiction. The show was simultaneously groundbreaking and traditional, notes media critic Jennifer Keeshan Armstrong. It acknowledged the reality of blended families while carefully avoiding any suggestion of marital failure. This tension between progressivism and traditionalism defined the series. The show's treatment of Carol Brady's first marriage became particularly problematic. The most glaring evidence of network interference was the complete absence of any explanation for Carol's first husband, explains Florence Henderson, who played Carol Brady in archival interviews. "I wanted to play her as divorced, which felt more realistic for the era. The network wouldn't allow even a mention of divorce. Instead, her previous marriage simply went unaddressed, neither divorced nor widowed, just a narrative void." This awkward compromise led to one of the show's most persistent mysteries. Viewers often ask what happened to Carol's first husband, notes Robert Reed, who played Mike Brady in earlier interviews. The truth is, the writers were prohibited from answering that question. Network policy prevented them from stating she was divorced, but they didn't want to explicitly say he died either. It became television's most famous unaddressed backstory. The show's portrayal of gender roles similarly balanced between reinforcing and questioning traditional norms. Carol Brady was quietly revolutionary, suggests feminist media scholar Susan Douglas. She was a stay-at-home mother, but college-educated. She occasionally mentioned professional aspirations. She shared decision-making equally with her husband. These elements suggested female autonomy in subtle ways while maintaining an outwardly traditional appearance. Mike Brady's character reflected similar complexity. Robert Reed played a father who was emotionally available, who listened to his children, who didn't rely solely on authority, explains masculinity scholar Michael Kimmel. While outwardly conventional, Mike Brady represented a more progressive, nurturing masculinity than most father figures on television at that time. The household structure itself contained subtle progressive elements. Notice that Alice was treated as part of the family, not just domestic help, points out cultural historian Thomas Doherty. Her opinions mattered in family decisions. She had personal storylines and relationships. This represented a more equitable view of household labor than was standard for the era. The network's fear of controversy extended to the show's visual presentation. ABC insisted on a traditional visual design that would reassure viewers, reveals set designer Ed Stevenson. The Brady house was deliberately idealized American suburban architecture. The furnishings projected upper-middle-class stability. Every visual element was calculated to balance the potentially controversial premise with reassuringly familiar imagery. This tension between concept and execution explains much about the show's distinctive tone. The Brady Bunch exists in this curious space between acknowledging changing American family structures while studiously avoiding any suggestion that these changes might be difficult or problematic, notes television critic Alan Sepinwall. The blending of the families happens virtually without conflict, creating a fantasy of painless family merging that had little connection to most viewers' actual experiences. The casting process similarly reflected this balancing act. When casting the parents, the network pushed for performers with squeaky clean images, reveals casting director Renee Valente. Florence Henderson had primarily been known for wholesome roles. Robert Reed came from serious theater and the respected series The Defenders. Their established images helped offset any potential controversy from the blended family premise. The children were specifically cast to create visual cohesion. The network was concerned that viewers would constantly be distinguishing between his kids and her kids, explains Sherwood Schwartz in archival interviews. We deliberately cast children who could plausibly look like siblings, similar coloring, features, and heights grouped by age. The famous opening grid visually unified them into a single family unit rather than emphasizing their separate origins. This careful navigation of progressivism and tradition extended to the show's storylines. The script systematically avoided any complex family dynamics that might arise from the blended situation, notes writer Lloyd Schwartz. Conflicts rarely stemmed from step-sibling tensions or adjustment difficulties. Instead, stories focused on universal childhood experiences that could occur in any family structure. This approach sidestepped potential controversy while making the show relatable to traditional families. Perhaps most tellingly, the series almost never acknowledged its own premise after the pilot. After establishing the blended family situation, the show rarely mentioned it again, observes media historian Ron Simon. The terms stepmother or stepfather were almost never used. The children treated both parents as if they had always been their parents. This deliberate narrative choice helped normalize the blended structure while avoiding any suggestion that it differed from traditional families. This conceptual contradiction explains much about both the show's appeal and its limitations. The Brady Bunch offered viewers a reassuring fantasy that America's changing family structures wouldn't disrupt traditional family values, suggests sociologist Stephanie Kuntz. It acknowledged that families were taking new forms while promising that these changes wouldn't fundamentally alter the family's function or harmony. That was a comforting message for an era experiencing significant social upheaval. The sibling rivalry that shocked the cast. Behind the scenes of television's most harmonious family, the child actors experienced relationship dynamics dramatically different from their on-screen personas, creating tensions, rivalries, and alliances that occasionally erupted into genuine conflict during the show's production. The Brady kids presented perfect sibling harmony on screen, but reality was considerably more complicated, reveals Barry Williams, who played Greg Brady. We were 6 children spanning ages 8 to 14 when the show began, each with different personalities, different professional experiences, and different approaches to the work. The fiction that we were all best friends was just that, fiction. These natural tensions were exacerbated by the production environment. The show required us to spend extraordinary amounts of time together in close quarters, explains Christopher Knight, who played Peter Brady. We were together during rehearsals, filming, schooling, publicity appearances, and eventually recording sessions and concert tours. That intense proximity would create friction in any group of children, let alone ones under the pressure of network television production. The most significant tension developed between the female cast members. There was a natural rivalry between the girls that mirrored their characters' relationships, reveals Maureen McCormick, who played Marcia Brady. Eve Plum, Jan, and I had particularly complicated interactions. We were close in age, competing for similar storylines, and experiencing adolescence in the artificial environment of television production. The Marcia dynamic had some basis in our actual experiences. This rivalry occasionally affected production. There were days when certain combinations of kids simply couldn't work effectively together, admits director Oscar Rudolph. We would sometimes rework scenes to separate children who were having particularly difficult interactions. The episode scripts presenting perfect sibling harmony were occasionally being filmed by kids who wouldn't speak to each other between takes. The boys experienced different relationship challenges. Barry, as the oldest, sometimes found it difficult to relate to the younger boys, explains Mike Lookinland, who played Bobby Brady. He was entering adolescence when the show began and had different interests and concerns. This created a natural distance that sometimes came across as condescension. The Big Brother knows best dynamic wasn't entirely acting. Age differences created natural groupings. We tended to bond with the cast members closest to our age, reveals Susan Olsen, who played Cindy Brady. Eve and I were closer despite playing distant sisters. Maureen and Barry had more in common as the oldest. These natural groupings sometimes contradicted our on-screen relationships, creating a strange disconnect between our portrayed and actual dynamics. The artificial family structure created additional complications. We were playing siblings while experiencing natural childhood attractions to each other, admits Williams. My well-publicized crush on Florence Henderson was one example, but there were also perfectly normal adolescent attractions among the teenage cast members. This created awkward situations where we were portraying siblings while navigating complex emotions toward each other. Competition for screen time and storylines intensified these natural tensions. As the show progressed, certain characters became more prominent, explains Knight. Marcia and Greg consistently received more focus and better storylines. This created understandable resentment among other cast members who felt their contributions were being minimized. When Jan complained about Marcia, she was expressing a frustration Eve actually felt about Maureen's prominence. These dynamics were carefully hidden from the public. The network and producers were selling the fantasy of perfect family harmony, notes publicist Michael Levine. Any suggestion of discord among the child actors would contradict the show's fundamental appeal. We were instructed to present the children as loving siblings in all public appearances, regardless of their actual relationships. The adult cast members often mediated these conflicts. Ann B. Davis, Alice, frequently served as peacemaker, reveals Olsen. When tensions between the children became disruptive, she would intervene with humor and perspective. Florence similarly tried to model professional behavior and mutual respect, though she was sometimes frustrated by our childish disputes. Robert Reed's complex relationship with the production created additional complications. Robert's frequent creative conflicts with the producers sometimes affected his interactions with us, explains Williams. He would occasionally withdraw emotionally when particularly frustrated with scripts or direction. As children, we didn't fully understand these professional disputes and sometimes interpreted his distance as personal rejection. The most surprising revelation is how these tensions actually benefited certain performances. The episodes focusing on sibling rivalry, particularly the January-March conflicts, have particular authenticity because they reflected actual dynamics, suggests television critic Robert Thompson. Eve channeled genuine frustration into her portrayal of Jan's resentment. The emotional truth of those performances came from real feelings carefully directed into the characters. As the show progressed, these relationships evolved in unexpected ways. By the later seasons, some earlier tensions had resolved while new ones emerged, explains Knight. The natural process of maturation changed our dynamics. Some relationships improved with age, while others became more complicated as we developed more distinct personalities and professional goals. The most telling evidence of these complex relationships appeared during the show's numerous revivals and reunions. Certain cast combinations consistently proved more challenging to reassemble than others, reveals producer Sherwood Schwartz. Scheduling conflicts often concealed personal reluctance to work with specific former castmates. The Brady Bunch reunions and revival projects rarely included the complete original cast, partly due to these lingering interpersonal dynamics. These complicated relationships don't negate genuine connections that also formed. Despite the tensions, "We shared a unique experience that created lasting bonds," acknowledges McCormick. "Our relationships were complex, simultaneously close and contentious, supportive and competitive. We weren't the perfect siblings we portrayed, but we weren't simply colleagues either. We occupied a strange middle ground that family performers often experience, artificial family connections that develop genuine emotional dimensions. This complexity explains why the cast's accounts of their relationships have varied over the years. Our descriptions of our relationships have sometimes seemed contradictory because the relationships themselves were contradictory," explains Williams. "We could be at odds one day and allied the next. The simplified narrative of either we were all best friends or we all secretly hated each other misses the complicated reality of children growing up together under highly unusual circumstances." Robert Reed's secret struggle. Behind his portrayal of America's ideal father, Robert Reed was living a life fundamentally at odds with the show's traditional family values, creating profound professional and personal conflicts that affected the series in ways viewers never suspected. Robert Reed's greatest performance wasn't Mike Brady, it was pretending to be comfortable as the face of traditional family values while being forced to conceal his identity as a gay man, explains Reed's friend and colleague E.G. Marshall. He was portraying the quintessential straight suburban father while knowing that revealing his true sexual orientation would not only end his career, but potentially destroy the show. In 1969, when the Brady Bunch began, Reed's situation was particularly precarious. This was an era when homosexuality was still classified as a mental illness, notes LGBTQ plus historian Eric Marcus. An openly gay man couldn't be a television star, particularly one playing an idealized father figure on a family show. Reed was trapped in an impossible situation, achieving his greatest professional success through a role that required him to deny his authentic self. This contradiction created significant internal conflict. Robert was a Shakespearean-trained actor with serious theatrical ambitions, explains director John Rich. He already felt the sitcom format was beneath his talents. The additional burden of portraying a character whose values often contradicted his own experiences created a profound dissonance that manifested in his frequent disputes with the creative team. These disputes became increasingly frequent as the series progressed. Robert's conflicts with Sherwood Schwartz weren't just about script quality, reveals Florence Henderson. They were also about the show's traditional values, which sometimes included subtle homophobia common to the era. Robert would object to certain jokes or characterizations that the straight writers and producers found innocuous, but that he recognized as problematic. The most dramatic example came during the 5th season episode, The Driver's Seat, which included a joke about effeminate men that Reed found offensive. Robert refused to appear in the final scene, recalls Lloyd Schwartz. It wasn't just artistic integrity. He was objecting to humor that demeaned people like himself, though he couldn't explicitly state that reason. Instead, he framed his objections in terms of taste and quality, which made him seem unreasonably difficult. Reed's conflicts often centered on what he saw as the show's overly simplistic portrayal of family life. Robert constantly pushed for more realism and nuance, explains writer Alfred Bessie. What seemed like actorly pretension was often his desire for the Brady family to address more meaningful issues. He believed television families should reflect some of the complexity of real families, including the challenges and differences many families learn to navigate, something he understood from personal experience. The isolation Reed experienced was profound. Robert couldn't confide in castmates about his fundamental conflict with the show, notes Henderson. While some adult industry professionals might have suspected his orientation, it wasn't discussed openly. He carried this burden largely alone, playing America's ideal husband and father, while unable to pursue his own chances for family happiness under the legal and social restrictions of the time. This isolation affected his relationship with the child actors. Robert was always appropriate and professional with us, Barry Williams emphasizes, but there was a reserve, a certain distance that we sometimes interpreted as coldness. In retrospect, he was likely protecting himself, maintaining boundaries that felt necessary given his precarious position. Despite these challenges, Reed formed meaningful connections with his young co-stars. Robert took his responsibility as our on-screen father seriously, explains Christopher Knight. He advocated for our education, objected when he felt we were being exploited commercially, and tried to model professional standards. His conflicts with producers were sometimes on our behalf, though we didn't fully appreciate that at the time. The most poignant aspect of Reed's situation was how his private struggle contradicted the show's central premise. The Brady Bunch was built around the idea of acceptance and blending different family elements into a harmonious whole, notes cultural critic Mary McNamara. Yet the social environment that embraced the show would not have accepted Reed's authentic identity. The series preached family acceptance, while its star could not be accepted for who he truly was. This contradiction took a personal toll. Robert increasingly withdrew into himself as the series progressed, recalls Henderson. The strain of maintaining his public persona, while fighting creative battles he often couldn't win, affected his health and well-being. The professional success that should have been his triumph became somewhat torturous. Producer Sherwood Schwartz acknowledged the complexity of their relationship. Robert and I had tremendous conflicts, primarily over scripts, Schwartz revealed in later interviews. What I didn't fully appreciate then was that some of his objections weren't simply artistic preferences, but deeply personal responses to content that affected him differently than it affected me. Our different lived experiences created a communication gap neither of us could fully bridge at the time. Reed's professionalism, despite these challenges, deserves recognition. Despite his conflicts with the creative team, Robert never let his personal struggles affect his performance, emphasizes Lloyd Schwartz. When the cameras rolled, he fully embodied Mike Brady. His commitment to the character never wavered, regardless of his behind-the-scenes battles. The most telling evidence of this commitment was Reed's continued participation in Brady reunions, despite his creative differences. Robert returned for the Brady Bunch Variety Hour, The Brady Girls Get Married, and A Very Brady Christmas, notes television historian Herbie J. Pilato. Despite his frustrations with the original series, he recognized his responsibility to the Brady legacy and the importance of Mike Brady to the audience. Reed's death from HIV-related causes in 1992 finally made public what he had been unable to share during the show's original run. The revelation of Robert's sexual orientation and the cause of his death created a cognitive dissonance for many fans, observes media scholar Robert Thompson. America's ideal father figure had been a gay man at a time when that identity was still stigmatized. It forced a reconsideration of both the character and the social restrictions that had trapped the actor in such a painful contradiction. This reconsideration has deepened appreciation for Reed's performance. Knowing what we know now about Robert's circumstances gives his portrayal of Mike Brady additional layers, suggests GLAAD Representative Matt Cain. He created a nurturing, emotionally available father figure that contradicted many stereotypes about masculinity, perhaps informed by his own experience of having to navigate restrictive gender expectations. Florence Henderson offered perhaps the most poignant perspective on Reed's legacy. Robert gave millions of children an image of a father who was patient, understanding, and emotionally present, she reflected after his death. That this gift came from someone who had to hide his own identity makes it both more tragic and more remarkable. He created a vision of family acceptance that he himself couldn't fully experience, a profound contribution that came at significant personal cost. The dangerous reality on TV's safest-seeming set. While The Brady Bunch appeared to be television's safest family show, the production actually exposed its young performers to surprising physical dangers, demanding conditions, and situations that would violate modern child safety and labor standards. The Brady house that millions saw on screen wasn't a real home, but a dangerous partial set, combined with a real house that wasn't designed for television production, explains set designer Roy Christopher. Most interior scenes were filmed on sound stages, but this created constant safety issues when matching shots between locations and navigating the cramped, makeshift spaces. The most famous set, the Brady's iconic living room with its open staircase, created persistent hazards. That staircase was genuinely dangerous, reveals Susan Olson. It was steeper than a normal staircase to create better camera angles. We were constantly running up and down those stairs in platform shoes, bell bottoms we could trip on, and sometimes limited visibility due to costumes or props. There were numerous falls and near misses that never made it on screen. These dangers extended to the show's frequent physical comedy. Many stunts we performed would require safety coordinators and special equipment today, explains Christopher Knight. When Peter broke Carol's vase with a basketball, when Greg fell through the attic floor, when we had food fights or physical collisions, those were often done without proper safety preparation. We were expected to perform our own low-level stunts regardless of the risks. The notorious artificial turf backyard created additional hazards. That AstroTurf was laid directly over concrete, recalls Mike Lookinland. Falling on it was like falling on green sandpaper over cement. We'd get scrapes, burns, and bruises from scenes requiring us to play on what looked like grass, but was actually a thin layer of plastic over a hard surface. The demands placed on the child actors often exceeded reasonable boundaries. Our filming schedule was exhausting, particularly during seasons when we were also recording albums and performing concerts, explains Williams. We might film all day, record music in the evening, then memorize the next day's script before sleep. The combination of academic requirements and production demands created chronic sleep deprivation for many of us. The show's Hawaiian episodes presented particularly dangerous conditions. Filming the notorious tarantula episode put me in actual danger, reveals McCormick. That was a real spider on my body. I was absolutely terrified, but expected to remain still while it crawled on me. No child actor today would be placed in that situation without significant safety protocols and probably a CGI alternative. The infamous Brady Grand Canyon trip similarly involved genuine risk. We were filming on the actual rim of the Grand Canyon, recalls Knight. Children were positioned near dangerous drops with minimal safety equipment by today's standards. The focus was getting the shots needed rather than ensuring our complete safety. It's shocking what was considered acceptable risk for child performers then. These dangers extended to everyday filming conditions. The lighting required for 1970s television cameras generated enormous heat, explains director John Rich. Sound stages would reach well over 90 degrees under those lights. The children would be wearing heavy polyester costumes under this intense heat for hours. Dehydration and heat exhaustion were common but rarely acknowledged as serious concerns. The show's demanding schedule affected the children's health in less visible ways. The constant pressure to maintain perfect Brady appearances while going through normal adolescence created significant stress, reveals McCormick. I developed eating disorders partly in response to the scrutiny of my appearance. Others experienced similar issues with body image and self-esteem, directly connected to the demands of looking perpetually perfect on camera. This appearance pressure became particularly problematic as the child actors entered puberty. The producers wanted us to remain perpetually childlike even as we were naturally developing, explains Williams. Boys' voices changing, girls developing, acne growth spurts. Normal adolescent changes were treated as production problems to be hidden rather than natural development to be accommodated. This created significant psychological stress during already challenging years. The educational accommodations further compromised the children's well-being. Our schooling was technically compliant with California regulations but hardly optimal, notes Olson. We received the minimum required 3 hours of education daily, often in makeshift classrooms with frequent interruptions for filming. Our education was clearly secondary to production needs, creating academic challenges that followed some of us long after the show ended. Perhaps most troubling were the minimal psychological safeguards. No one considered the long-term psychological impact of childhood fame, explains Knight. There were no counselors helping us navigate the unusual circumstance of being nationally famous during formative years, no guidance for our parents on helping us maintain normal development while meeting the demands of being Brady children. The focus was entirely on production needs rather than developmental ones. This extended to the children's financial arrangements. Most of us earned far less than people assume, reveals Lookinland. Our contracts were negotiated when the show's success was uncertain and renegotiations were minimal. More significantly, most of us had limited control over our earnings, which were often depleted by manager fees, agent percentages, and sometimes parental mismanagement. Several of us discovered in adulthood that our Brady earnings had been significantly diminished or depleted entirely. The commercial exploitation intensified these issues. Beyond the series itself, we were increasingly used for merchandise, albums, and appearances with minimal additional compensation, explains Plum. Our images appeared on lunchboxes, board games, and countless products while we received standard episode payments regardless of how extensively our likenesses were being monetized. The most significant danger may have been to the children's developing identities. We were simultaneously ourselves and Brady characters in the public mind, reflects Knight. This created a profound identity confusion that followed many of us into adulthood. When strangers feel entitled to your time and attention based on a character you played as a child, it fundamentally distorts your sense of self and personal boundaries. These dangerous conditions weren't created from malice, but from different standards of the era. Production practices considered normal in the early 1970s would violate numerous regulations today, explains entertainment attorney Melanie Cook. Modern child performer protections address working hours, educational requirements, psychological support, financial trusts, hazardous conditions, and many other issues that were simply not regulated during the Brady Bunch production. This historical context doesn't diminish the impact on the young performers. Understanding that our experiences reflected industry standards of the time doesn't change the fact that those standards placed us at risk, emphasizes Williams. The Brady Bunch appeared wholesome and safe while being produced under conditions that often prioritized production expediency over child welfare, a contradiction that defined many aspects of our Brady experiences. The merchandising machine that exploited children. Beyond the beloved television series, the Brady Bunch spawned a merchandising empire that systematically exploited its child performers, creating products, recordings, and appearances that generated millions while providing minimal compensation to the young actors whose images drove these commercial ventures. Most viewers don't realize that the Brady Bunch was television's first major merchandising phenomenon focused on child characters, explains licensing historian Jeffrey Allen. While previous shows like Star Trek had merchandise, the Brady Bunch pioneered the comprehensive licensing of child performers' images across dozens of product categories, creating a template for all children's merchandising that followed. This merchandising began modestly, but expanded rapidly as the show gained popularity. Initially, there were standard items like lunchboxes and board games, reveals Lloyd Schwartz. As ratings improved, Paramount aggressively expanded licensing to include everything from Brady-themed bedroom furniture to clothing lines, school supplies, and dozens of other product categories. The Brady children's faces appeared on products in every major department store and variety store in America. The financial arrangements revealed the exploitative nature of this system. Our standard contracts included broad merchandise rights with minimal additional compensation, explains Barry Williams. We received our regular episode payments regardless of how many products featured our images or how much revenue these generated. While this practice was industry standard, it meant the studio profited enormously from merchandise, while we received essentially nothing from these additional revenue streams. This exploitation became more pronounced with the recording ventures. The Brady Kids albums and singles represented an entirely new commercial territory. None of us were cast for musical ability, notes Christopher Knight, yet suddenly we were recording albums and eventually touring as musical performers. This created additional work obligations not covered by our original contracts, all while our images and voices generated significant additional revenue for the studio and producers. The recording process itself revealed the mercenary nature of these ventures. Most of us weren't strong singers, which created production challenges, admits Maureen McCormick. Producers used session singers to enhance or sometimes replace our vocals while still marketing the records as authentic Brady performances. The commercial imperative overrode any concern about musical authenticity or whether these projects were appropriate additional demands on child performers. These recording projects created additional burdens on the already overworked child actors. We would film the show during the day, then record music in the evenings, recalls Susan Olson. This schedule left minimal time for schoolwork, rest, or normal childhood activities. The priority was always commercial exploitation of our popularity, regardless of the impact on our well-being or development. The merchandising reach extended to public appearances that further strained the children. We were frequently sent on promotional tours to department stores, state fairs, and shopping centers, explains Eve Plum. These appearances drew enormous crowds, but were often poorly organized with inadequate security. We faced overwhelming, sometimes frightening crowds while being expected to maintain perfect Brady behavior, regardless of our exhaustion or the chaotic circumstances. The financial structures were particularly problematic. Unlike modern child performer protections, there were minimal regulations ensuring our earnings were preserved for our adulthood, notes Mike Lookenland. Coogan laws, named after child actor Jackie Coogan, who discovered in adulthood that his parents had spent his earnings, were not yet comprehensive. Many of us discovered as adults that our Brady earnings had been significantly diminished through manager fees, parental access, and taxation. These commercial pressures directly affected the show's creative direction. As merchandising became more lucrative, storylines increasingly accommodated commercial opportunities, reveals writer Joseph Bonaduce. Episodes featuring the kids performing musically, episodes showcasing licensable activities or settings, Even dialogue referencing potential merchandise commercial considerations increasingly influenced creative decisions. The most visible example was the creation of the Brady Kids animated series. The cartoon allowed for additional merchandise categories while requiring only our voices, explains Williams. This further extended the commercial exploitation with minimal additional compensation. Our contracts gave producers enormous latitude to create derivative projects with limited obligation to secure meaningful additional payments. These practices created lasting consequences for the child performers. Many of us experienced financial challenges in adulthood, despite having starred in what remained one of television's most commercially successful properties, notes Knight. The disconnection between the Brady's enormous cultural and commercial footprint and our personal financial situations reveals how completely the system was designed to benefit studios and producers rather than the child performers who created the characters. The Brady merchandising experience reflected larger industry practices. What happened with the Brady children wasn't unique, but rather unusually visible due to the show's extraordinary success, explains entertainment attorney John Branca. The industry systematically structured contracts to minimize payments to child performers while maximizing studio profits from their images and performances. These practices continued until legislative reforms and union negotiations gradually improved protections. These exploitative practices created a strange irony. While portraying the perfect family on screen, the business infrastructure surrounding us was aggressively extracting maximum commercial value from our childhoods, reflects Williams. The Brady Bunch appeared to celebrate family values, while the business practices commercialized and commodified the actual children creating those performances. This contradiction became most visible during the 1976 to 1977 variety show The Brady Bunch Hour, which proceeded without Eve Plumb. That production represented peak exploitation, notes Knight. We were performing elaborate musical numbers and comedy sketches regardless of our abilities or training. The commercial imperative to continue monetizing the Brady property overrode concerns about appropriate vehicle or performer welfare. It was the logical conclusion of treating child performers primarily as commercial assets rather than developing young artists. The most telling evidence of this exploitation was how it affected the performers' relationship with their Brady identities. Many of us developed complicated feelings about our Brady characters, explains McCormick. They represented both our greatest professional success and a system that had prioritized commercial exploitation over our well-being. This ambivalence complicated our relationship with the show's legacy and sometimes with each other. The Brady merchandising model established patterns that dominated children's entertainment for decades. From the Brady Bunch through Hannah Montana, the industry template remained remarkably consistent, notes children's entertainment historian Barbara Sprung. Create child characters with broad appeal, aggressively license their images across product categories, develop musical components regardless of performers' abilities, and structure contracts to minimize performer compensation for these derivative revenue streams. This exploitation creates a troubling dimension to the show's wholesome legacy. The Brady Bunch celebrated family values on screen while embodying corporate values behind the scenes, suggests media ethicist Michael Shapiro. The disconnect between the show's portrayal of parental protection and nurturing and the business practices that commercialize the child, performers' images, voices, and developmental years represents a fundamental contradiction at the heart of the Brady enterprise. The enduring legacy that survived scandal. When the Brady Bunch ended its original run in 1974, few could have predicted its extraordinary afterlife, a cultural phenomenon that survived cancellation, cast conflicts, revelations about behind-the-scenes realities, and changing social attitudes to remain one of television's most enduring and beloved properties. The Brady Bunch achieved something remarkable in American culture, explains television historian Tim Brooks. It transcended its original status as a modestly successful sitcom to become a multi-generational touchstone. Few television properties have remained actively present in the cultural conversation for over 5 decades without significant interruption. This afterlife began almost immediately with widespread syndication. Within a year of cancellation, the show was airing daily in most American markets, notes syndication expert Jeff Greenfield. This constant presence allowed the original 117 episodes to reach new generations of viewers. Children of the late 1970s and early 1980s experienced the show as intensely as its original audience, creating an unusually broad demographic connection to the series. This syndication success led to numerous revival attempts: The Brady Bunch Variety Hour, The Brady Brides, A Very Brady Christmas, and The Bradys all attempted to capitalize on the original's enduring popularity. What's remarkable isn't just that producers kept reviving the concept, but that most of the cast repeatedly returned despite the original production's challenges, observes television critic Alan Sepinwall. This created an unusual continuity where viewers literally watched these performers grow from children to middle-aged adults across decades of Brady incarnations. The property's adaptability proved particularly significant. The Brady Bunch successfully transitioned across media and formats, explains media scholar Henry Jenkins. From sitcom to variety show, from animated series to TV movies, from theatrical films to reality television, the concept demonstrated remarkable flexibility. Few properties successfully navigate so many format transitions while maintaining cultural relevance. This adaptability extended to the property's relationship with its own image. The 1990s films, The Brady Bunch movie, and A Very Brady sequel represented something unusual in adaptation, notes film historian Leonard Maltin. They simultaneously parodied and celebrated the original, positioning the Bradys as anachronistically wholesome figures in a cynical modern world. This self-aware approach allowed the property to acknowledge changing social attitudes while preserving its essential appeal. The most surprising aspect of this endurance was how it survived revelations that contradicted the show's wholesome image. As cast memoirs revealed behind-the-scenes conflicts, as Robert Reed's private life became public, as Maureen McCormick disclosed her post-show struggles with addiction, these revelations could have tarnished the show's legacy, suggests cultural historian Thomas Doherty. Instead, they humanized the production without diminishing its cultural significance, adding complexity to our understanding of the show rather than undermining its position. This resilience partly stemmed from the show's position in American memory. The Brady Bunch became less a television show and more a shared cultural reference point, explains sociologist Todd Gitlin. The term Brady Bunch evolved into shorthand for wholesome family dynamics, blended families, even 1970s aesthetics. This broader symbolic function allowed it to survive revelations about specific production realities. The show's visual distinctiveness contributed significantly to this cultural staying power. The Brady aesthetic, from the iconic grid opening to the distinctive split-level house to the period-specific fashions, created immediate visual recognition, notes design historian Alexandra Lang. These visual elements became shorthand for an entire era of American domestic life, referenced and parodied across popular culture from The Simpsons to Saturday Night Live. This visual iconography extended to the performers themselves. The Brady children's images remained frozen in public consciousness, observes celebrity historian Leo Brody. This created the unusual circumstance where the actors continued aging while their Brady personas remained perpetually young in syndication. This contradiction, most visible during reunion projects, became part of the property's fascinating tension between nostalgia and reality. The show's seemingly simple values explain much of its continued relevance. Despite its production complexities and the changing social landscape, the show's central appeal remains its portrayal of family members supporting each other despite differences, suggests family therapist Dr. William Doherty. This core value, family acceptance and solidarity, transcends the specific 1970s setting and continues resonating across generations and changing family structures. This values-based appeal created the foundation for the show's most recent revival, 2018's A Very Brady renovation, which became HGTV's most successful series. The renovation show demonstrated the property's remarkable cultural durability, notes television analyst Brian Steinberg. A home improvement show featuring the original cast members renovating the actual house used for exterior shots became a ratings phenomenon nearly 50 years after the original series. Few entertainment properties maintain such multi-generational appeal and recognition. The most telling evidence of the show's cultural penetration may be how it influenced actual family dynamics. Therapists working with blended families in the 1970s and 1980s frequently encountered references to the Brady model, reveals family studies scholar Francesca Adler-Bader. The show's portrayal of successful family blending, while simplified, provided a reference point and aspiration for actual blended families navigating complex transitions. Its cultural impact extended beyond entertainment into actual family formation experiences. The cast members' relationship with this extraordinary legacy remains complex. We've experienced both the benefits and limitations of being permanently associated with these characters, reflects Williams. The Brady connection provided ongoing professional opportunities, while sometimes limiting how we were perceived as individuals and performers. We're simultaneously grateful for and occasionally constrained by these roles that have defined much of our public identities. This complexity hasn't diminished the remarkable achievement the series represents. Few television programs transform from merely popular entertainment to cultural institution, observes media historian Robert Thompson. The Brady Bunch completed that transition, evolving from a modestly rated sitcom to a multi-generational reference point that continues influencing how Americans conceptualize family dynamics, domestic spaces, and even the visual representation of family unity. The show's most significant legacy may be how it balanced between reflecting and shaping American family ideals. The Brady Bunch didn't just entertain, it presented an aspirational model of family harmony that acknowledged changing family structures while affirming traditional family values, suggests cultural historian Stephanie Kuntz. This unique position, simultaneously traditional and progressive, allowed it to remain relevant across decades of social change, providing both comforting nostalgia and a flexible template for evolving family forms. Here's the story. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the extraordinary truth behind the Brady Bunch. From the revolutionary concept that terrified ABC to the sibling rivalry that shocked the cast, from Robert Reed's secret struggle to the dangerous reality on TV's safest-seeming set, these revelations transform how we understand this beloved cultural touchstone. What makes the Brady Bunch isn't just its catchy theme song or the comforting predictability of its storylines. It's the perfect storm of circumstances that created it, a concept that quietly acknowledged changing American family structures while reassuringly suggesting these changes wouldn't disrupt traditional family values. Performers who created genuine warmth on screen, despite sometimes challenging relationships behind the scenes, and a production that created an idealized vision of family life that continues providing a reference point for how we imagine domestic harmony should look and feel. In many ways, the making of The Brady Bunch mirrors the show's central premise, bringing together disparate elements that didn't necessarily fit seamlessly at first, but eventually created something that functioned as a cohesive whole despite occasional underlying tensions. The production team, like Mike and Carol Brady, was blending different perspectives, navigating conflicts, and working toward harmony that wasn't always perfectly achieved, but remained a worthy aspiration. The show reminds us that cultural touchstones often emerge from complicated origins, that beloved entertainment frequently contains contradictions between its public image and private reality, that commercial enterprises can create genuine emotional connections despite their profit motivations, that performers can create meaningful work despite challenging production circumstances. These contradictions don't diminish the Brady Bunch's achievement, but rather explain its unique cultural position and enduring appeal. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of television's most beloved and misunderstood creations, hit that like button and subscribe for more revelations about the classic shows that shaped our culture. We uncover the stories that other channels are afraid to tell. What are your memories of the Brady Bunch? Has this inside look changed how you view the show? Let us know in the comments below. Next up, we're exposing the untold story behind another iconic television classic. The production challenges, network battles, and behind-the-scenes dynamics that created a show generations have treasured. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, in television as in life, perfect family harmony may be as much aspirational fantasy as lived reality. A lesson The Brady Bunch teaches us both through its content and through the remarkable story of its creation.